setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic. It is February 3rd, 2020. Here, as always, with the great Dylan Burkhart of Hoops. Dylan, my man, how are you?
I'm good. You enjoyed the Super Bowl last night?
I did. Wrapped up and finally an end of football, although the XFL, I'm sure, is really going to sweep the country.
Which is going to get higher ratings, the XFL or college basketball?
Taking the NCAA tournament out of it?
Yeah, just like
regular season?
A random February
the XFL
weekend game. Yeah, you hate to see it, but it's true.
I see you're still wearing your Browns gear, representing.
Big night last night.
Attaboy. I did get in my futures bet on the Eagles right after the game, so we're all ready for the 2021 Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I got him at 28-1.
Yeah, my first touchdown bet scored the second touchdown of the game last night, so we don't need to talk about anything.
I had a split. I took the Chiefs to cover 1.5, but I took the over.
Once they sucker bet.
Once they realized to throw the damn ball downfield.
It was a good game, though.
It was. I thought they were actually going to sneak it out late. When they got that late touchdown on that turnover, I thought there was a chance the Niners were going to come back down and tack a touchdown on, and then I was going to be all up in the money. But alas, here we are.
Here we are, ready to talk some college.
Ready to talk some hoops. Big week behind, big week ahead, obviously. The highlight here, of course, next Saturday, Michigan State Part 2. But that is going to be the focus for a podcast later this week. Right now, we are going to get into the weekend that was Michigan with a really, really important win over Rutgers at the Garden. Dylan and I were both there, so we were going to start there in terms of today's episode. But Michigan State, obviously coming off a loss to
Wisconsin.
Thank you, Wisconsin. And then we're going to get into the games tomorrow night, on Tuesday night. Michigan hosting Ohio State, Michigan hosting Ohio State, Michigan State hosting Penn State. There we go. So a lot to get into. Quick, real short pitch. Make sure you are subscribed to both The Athletic and Hoops. Your support of those sites is what keeps this podcast going. We are obviously ad-free. We do this to supplement what we actually do in terms of paying bills. So,
and this is the week to do it. Big week, a lot of
time.
Content. Should be fun.
Should be very fun. All right, let's start in New York City, Dylan. Always great going to the Garden, first of all. I know there was a lot of moaning, whining, bitching, complaining about giving up a home game to play in New York, but it is one of the great places to watch basketball in this country, and I just don't get the
and Michigan doesn't lose
complaining. That's so true. 10 straight wins,
helpful,
something like that.
Helpful a little bit. It was a great atmosphere, though. I think the fact that Rutgers has been so good this year really brought out a lot of people who I don't think would have necessarily gone to that game, and they were ready to get into it. We were sitting right in the middle of the Rutgers sections, the students on one side, the alumni on the other, and they were getting into it. It was an awesome environment. I just love those neutral games when it's a full house and you got the back and forth crowd. That's like feels like pure college basketball to me, so I enjoyed it. I get that.
You got that East Coast vibe from those North Jersey folks, man.
Oh,
they're their own breed.
A lot of hostility.
They're their own breed. Yeah. No, but it was great. Good showing from Michigan fans. Probably would have been more if Rutgers fans weren't scooping up tickets and driving the price up. But, yeah, I mean, it felt conference tournament like. It felt, I don't know if I'd quite go NCAA tournament, but it was great. It was great.
I think conference tournament, because NCAA tournament games rarely have that maybe later ones, but usually you have more of the fact that there were so many fans that could actually just go to this game easily, right? Like usually I think of like smaller, more empty, especially early in the NCAA tournament game, whereas conference tournaments, you have big fan bases because they're generally close to where the teams play, although that's not always the case in the Big Ten, but that's neither here nor there.
All right, so the big news of the day, obviously, twofold. Zavier Simpson making his return after a one-game suspension, and Brandon Johns continuing these rather significant strides forward where I think, you're seeing more buy-in outside the walls of Michigan of maybe Brandon Johns is who he was supposed to be. It's getting there, and beyond, we talked about this that day, I think, later that night, Dylan, like, the threes were nice, right? Good for him. He made open 3-point shots. The thing that jumped out to me was everything else, him dribbling the ball, getting in, and kickouts, and just looking like a basketball player, man, and looking confident and making things happen and not kind of waiting for the game to come to him. It was a big, on that stage, that was a big deal for his confidence.
I think you might be seeing more buy-in within the walls of Brandon Johns' head that Brandon Johns is who he's supposed to be. He played with just confidence last week that he hasn't played with. Ethan wrote about him on our site and pointed out that it was the first time he scored double digits in back-to-back games in his career. So he's shown these flashes, but the fact that he was able to do it 2 games in a row, both away from home, he hasn't done that, right? And I think, the play that stands out to me was that dribble drive from the top of the key where he flung a one-handed pass to Eli Brooks for a kick-out 3. Like, that's something you might have seen him do in high school, but you haven't seen him come close to doing that in college or at this level. And he just had probably the best week of his career, and Michigan needed every bit of it, really, when you consider the circumstances on Tuesday at Nebraska and then Saturday against Rutgers. I didn't really think this Rutgers team was a great match for him, honestly, before the game. They have a lot of strong physical guys who are a little smaller and quicker, and I thought Brandon did a really good job defending on the perimeter, more as a true college forward than like a power forward who Michigan's trying to do different things with. I thought they switched more with him. I thought he moved his feet really well, and that sort of set the tone. It's those other things that set the tone for his growth as much as making a few shots. But I do think that hitting those 2 early threes, his confidence just started flowing from there, and the rest kind of fell into place.
Yeah, and it's I thought that he played a physical game, right? I mean, everyone knows how Rutgers plays, right? They want to just bang you, physically wear you out, intimidate you. And when you think of Brandon Johns, you don't think about that, right? The measure of physicality that I often have seen from Brandon, like his idea of physicality is that one power dribble offensive charge where he just drives into a guy. Like that's his physical basketball, right? But in this game, I thought he actually matched them. Didn't get moved out of the paint, right? Held his own defensively when he did maybe catch a guy on his hip or work through screens and things like that. Because, I mean, to see Rutgers on TV and to see Rutgers in person is, I think, very different in terms of understanding just how physical that team is. Do you agree?
Yeah, you can't play harder than Rutgers.
Right.
Rutgers is going to play harder than every team Rutgers plays against. You have to be more skilled. You have to match what they're bringing, like with physical play, but you're never going to just out tough them. And you have to have a level of toughness to really survive that. And then your level of skill can kind of take over, right? Like that's the key to beating Rutgers. And so Johns went for 18 points a game this week, played 38 minutes. You have to remember, he played one of the worst games of his entire season against Illinois. I mean,
right.
He really struggled in that game. So something got the message across to him because he had not been really in a spot where he was playing great basketball. So whatever they got out of Brandon, especially like you look at the situation where Livers comes back for a minute, John's back on the bench. You don't really know where his season's going to go. So to put this week together in this format, I think is a big step in the right direction for him.
Right. And now consistency, right? That's going to be that's the thing now. He's going to be popping up on scouting reports. Teams are going to be keying on him. This is going to be, and also the expectations. right? We're talking about a guy who has openly talked about his dealings with confidence and belief in himself and understanding all these things. Well, that is having a personality like that can be a little bit burdensome once there's expectations. So, we know the Michigan fan base, right? If he goes out and has 2-point games against Ohio State, it's going to be, oh God, this guy sucks. He should transfer, and it's just, for him, it's just kind of staying focused on what got him here.
Yeah, and he's said something like that after the game too. Like, he just wants to keep steady and not like be too focused on everything else. And I do think it's those little things. It's playing defense on the perimeter. It's making the right rotations on defense. You're not looking for Brandon Johns to go and score 16, 17 points every night. You're looking for him to be a solid guy who you can trust to be in the right spot on both ends of the court and do his job. And he's getting much closer to that. And he wasn't that player in late December. And then he was forced into a role where he was expected to be that player every game against very good teams in a very hard stretch of schedule. And slowly but surely he's getting to the level where he can be that player.
Right. Because, what happens here, right? If he goes and does this again against Ohio State, well, the next game is what the next game is. And he will be the talking point going into that game. Brandon Johns versus, the school from the backyard and blah, 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 and all those things that are going to come with it. And
He'll be a talking point.
Huh?
He'll be a talking point. The talking point is not going to change. It's going to be the last game that Zavier Simpson and Cassius Smith play against each other.
But you know what I mean. It'll be everyone talking about it, and he's going to get a million questions about it. So this is a big test for what is, you mentioned, between the years. I feel like this is something to kind of show some growth emotionally, maturity, and all those things, which, Brandon, for all the shit that's been talked on this guy, how I think he has shown a degree of resiliency that is probably underappreciated. It would have been easy to check out and quit, or, all how touted he was as a freshman, barely did anything last year, stuck with it. The ups and downs of this year, maybe there's a payoff coming, and it's always good to see that happen. So let's get into Zavier Simpson.
All right.
So obviously a lot going on in terms of his, kind of being put on the right out in the forefront of, okay, you want to be the leader. Well, this was a week that kind of questioned, that leadership, and he needed to answer the call. I think he did. I think he had a great game against Rutgers. Obviously, there were some turnovers, and a lot of them were bad turnovers. But all in all, though, it looked like the Zavier Simpson that leads to winning basketball for the University of Michigan.
Yeah, everything that happened off the court doesn't change the fact that on the court, for Michigan to be its best self is for Zavier Simpson to completely control a game and pull the strings. That was very much the case on Saturday. I think that Rutgers plays a style of defense that doesn't make a lot of sense to play against.
Right.
Zavier Simpson-led team. They put a lot of pressure on the ball. They hard hedge and trap ball screens, which is one thing that you can do, and it works well for them, but Simpson is adept at finding those passes, right? Whether it's a roll, whether it's a spot up on the other side of the court, and he did a great job of that. And basically, we talk all the time about should Simpson be a scorer or a playmaker, and it does depend on how the other team plays defense, but the way Rutgers plays defense allows him to be that playmaker, which he'll gladly be, and he had, 10 assists, probably a few others that led to fouls. When Michigan was playing its best basketball against Rutgers, it was out of those ball screen looks that Simpson's just so comfortable in, and that's when everyone else starts to look really good, right? That's when John Teske gets a monster dunk because he's getting the ball in the right spot, rolling to the rim against a help defender who's 6'6". That's when Simpson is finding catch-and-shoot threes for other guys and just getting in the spots where he can pick things apart, and that was definitely the case on Saturday, despite he did have those turnovers. Some of them were just awful. Some of them were just shit that happens. it was a weird game in that sense. But I do think there was a stretch there after the first media timeout in the second half where Michigan's offense looked probably as good as it has in a few weeks, if not months.
Right.
They really got clicking there. I think they scored on 10 of 12 possessions in a row, and it was the ball was moving around. They were getting the looks they wanted, and they kind of played with that swagger that they showed earlier in the season.
I'll tell you what, man, like if they can get things going here, right, and kind of turn this season around and blah, 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 all that crap, like those two made free throws. If he had missed the front end, that was a 1-and-1, wasn't it? After he missed he missed the front end of the 1-and-1 like 14 seconds beforehand. I think it was 40 seconds left. And then he goes back to the line. If he had missed the front end of that and they'd come down, right, scored, won the game, and just worst case scenario for Michigan.
Essentially what happened exactly a week earlier.
Yeah, backbreaker, right? Backbreaker. You get the guy back from suspension. He goes in and misses the 2 game-winning free throws at the end of the game, and they lose. That would have been really hard to come back from. So him stepping up in that spot and hitting those 2 free throws, and then coming back and doing it again with whatever it was, 5-6 seconds left or something. The game was already pretty much in hand. But, man, that was a pressure spot that, there's always moments in years where things can really go one way or another. And he answered the call there.
Yeah, I think you look at this whole week kind of in that light. If you think about the 48 hours from the Illinois game to Monday when he gets suspended, I don't know that you were thinking lock in a 2-0 week for Michigan this week, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you could really afford anything other than a 2-0 week if you are Michigan. So the fact that they figured out how to win at Nebraska, obviously that was not an impressive showing from the Cornhuskers, but Michigan kind of reinvented itself, played through the post, did some different things, created enough offense to win the game. And then they won, and they sat in and basically took Rutgers' best punch in the first and second half, and then came back and took control of that game. So Michigan needed both of those wins this week because basically they left a game on the floor against Illinois that they should have won, right? And I think Franz also had 2 late free throws against Rutgers. He missed the 2 against Illinois. So a little bit of redemption there. But the point is that this week could have gone a lot worse for Michigan. And it started out like it was all going off the deep end, right? So I think they deserve a lot of credit for figuring out a way to right the ship, so to speak. And now it sets up just a huge week at home against Ohio State and Michigan State.
And yeah, right. And suddenly, and it's not only that, it's 3 home games in your next 4 games, and the only road game is at Northwestern. So suddenly there's a door here for opportunity, and it kind of goes back to that, whatever conversation we had about what they do in this 8-game stretch being so important. Well, they're at the midway point of it, and this has gone about as bizarrely as I think
they
have ever imagined.
The first 2 games of that stretch went about as poorly as possible, and then the best player on the team got suspended. But
and Isaiah Livers comes back and then gets hurt again.
Yeah, exactly. So all that happened, and to figure out how to sort of get back on track is impressive, because Rutgers was going into that game thinking they were going to beat Michigan at Madison Square Garden. Like, that team was confident. That team played hard as all hell. So I do think that you have to look at that as a quality win. I mean, it's a Q1 win for Michigan, and it could be the kind of thing that gets a little bit of confidence back, gets some momentum back, and it's a week where you're going to need it. So that'll be really interesting. And I think playing on a neutral floor like that, I think it really helps this team's demeanor and psyche, because they've been so good in those situations for so long, and it's just a more attainable quality win than if you were playing at Rutgers, for example, right?
Sure. And yeah, I mean, talking to some Rutgers writers, they were really talking about this as kind of like a program type win. Like these, when you're building something like what Steve Pikiell's trying to do out there, the chance of beating a program like Michigan in New York City at Madison Square Garden, right? It would have been a back-to-back wins over Purdue and Michigan after beating Indiana like 2 weeks ago and stuff like that. It just, these kind of validating moments that they're just desperate for. This was one of them. Like, that's what people were thinking about out there. So to go answer that,
it was a program win. It was a program that has a senior point guard who's won 29 games on neutral courts.
No doubt.
And it's a lot more of it's a team that knows how to handle that versus a team who's trying to get to that level.
Yep.
How many games has Rutgers won on neutral floors over the last however many years, right? It's all new to them. And I think that's where you see Michigan stand out in the Bahamas. It's where you see Michigan stand out in this situation. And I think it's really probably the best redeeming quality of this Michigan team is that they've played in so many big games, and that experience has paid off for them in key spots.
Yeah, great point. So I guess before getting into tomorrow night and Penn State,
Ohio State,
sorry. I'm mixing and matching. When you look at other elements of the week that was, and it's everything from, Eli Brooks had followed a great game at Nebraska with what at times was a pretty poor showing against Rutgers, but I think he finished really strong.
He had the two biggest plays of the game probably, where he hit that three and then drew a charge on the next possession.
Yeah, but in my opinion, for the first 30 minutes of that game, it was not a great day for Eli Brooks, I didn't think.
No, he hit 3 threes, but he had some awkward moments offensively, I would say. I think that
weird inbounds pass that got stolen, there was just like kind of some fluky weird things, but and I know that's how they overplay, but
Michigan, I think, turned the ball over 3 or 4 times on basically exchanges that led exactly to open layups, whether they were like handoffs, lazy passes. It's not what you want to see, but Eli was in the middle of a lot of those. It's hard to sometimes tell like who those exchanges around, but yeah, not great.
So, but everyone from, seeing Franz, I think, just continue to grow and grow and grow. And I thought it was a decent showing from John Teskey the other day. Nothing out of the bench, essentially. What else do you kind of take away from these 2 wins, and what are actual kind of signs moving forward that you think are kind of things to look at?
I think the fact that Juwan Howard didn't play the bench in the second half is a sign of progress for him based on learning about the stakes of playing in the Big Ten. I think early in the conference season, especially away from home, he kind of went to his bench a little too often. To see him only play, I think Austin Davis was the only player to play off the bench in the second half. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
And he played like 4 minutes or whatnot. So I think sometimes that's what you have to do, and especially when you have guys when your starters are playing well, you just have to ride with them. And I think that is something he wasn't necessarily comfortable doing earlier this season, and credit for that shift. I don't think, you don't need 8-9 guys to be a great team. You need 5.5. Right. This is college basketball, and I think that gets lost sometimes in all the talk about depth. And I get it, you need to build it earlier in the season, but if Michigan can get reliable production from the people it needs, I don't think you have to worry about going that deep in the bench. So that's something that stands out to me. I think, I don't know. Do you have another big takeaway you want to throw in there? I don't think my overall, I look at something as changing dramatically. I think it's another huge test this week, though, and I think this team is capable of playing well this week, and I think they just have to prove it and do it at home. And they've struggled more at home, I think, with the expectations of knowing they should win than a game like at Rutgers or at the Garden or playing away from home. So I wonder if they can play a little looser at home coming up this week.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the depth and the bench thing. Isaiah Livers will obviously change things, right? That'll be key.
Some point.
I do think you'd like to see David DeJulius be able to give you something. I mean, this was not a good week for him, and the door swung open for him at Nebraska to kind of make a statement or whatever, but did not happen. Played poorly. It was basically they had to go to Eli Brooks instead, and then DeJulius was basically a non-factor and played 6 minutes, went over 2. against Rutgers, but you'd like to be able to get some reliable minutes out of him.
He's shooting 39% on twos and 17% on threes in Big Ten games. And a lot of that comes down to just the shots that he takes, right? I think the last possession he was in the game, he dribbled down. It was like a no-pass possession. He dribbled into an 18-footer. And I think, you just can't have that when you're looking for better shots. Like, if you have that late in the shot clock, fine. But those shots early in the shot clock just are not going to lead to playing efficient basketball. So that is a struggle. And I wrote about him a couple weeks ago. He was hitting a ton of catch-and-shoot corner threes in non-conference play and just isn't even getting those shot attempts. So I don't know if it's trying to grow him into more of a playmaker role that is taking him out of those spots or what. But it was tough. That Nebraska game set up, like, this is going to be the DeJulius point guard showing, and it was this is how we can run a team without a point guard and let Eli Brooks just kind of pass the ball around and do something else, which is not going to be...
Which would basically work against Nebraska.
Yes, that's not a sustainable... That wouldn't work against Rutgers, for example, right? So that was definitely the case there. Be interesting. Obviously, Michigan State in-state rivalry game coming up. Interesting to see what they can get out of him coming up this week. I don't know. You would like some guard depth, right?
Yeah, you got to have something.
Being able to trust him, you're looking at Brooks and Simpson playing 40 minutes every night for the next 2 months, which is, if you can get them to 36, might be a little more manageable.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say common, but it's not out of the question for Zavier Simpson to pick up 2 fouls in the first 8 minutes of a game. That has happened.
Iowa.
So, you have to have something.
So here's a question for you. Isaiah Livers comes back at some point.
Yeah. I know.
Do you slide someone down and play with more big wings and try to keep Brandon Johns, not like don't worry about the starting lineup, but like as a part of the rotation? So basically like a Franz, Livers, Johns, Teskey with Simpson.
Yeah.
Or with Eli. Is that a lineup you would look to play more of?
Yes. And I think I like the idea of Franz at the 2.
Yeah.
Not like for 15 minutes, but like just putting that lineup out there for 7 minutes in a game, right? Just make teams, you have to keep teams kind of constantly reacting to what you're doing, and Livers gives them that option. It feels like without Livers, it's been the opposite, right? They have to constantly try to match up against what the opponents are doing. Well, once Livers comes back, the way that Johns is playing, you can kind of flip that script a little bit.
Yeah. I worry about, I don't know how well Franz Wagner defending twos is going to work.
Also depends on the 2, right?
You do have more size, and rebounding has been an issue for Michigan on the defensive glass, so maybe that helps more. Maybe Franz Wagner is a better rebounder against a 2 guard than a bigger, more physical player. Yeah, I think
but it's also not like the Big Ten is littered with just lightning quick playmaking 2s,
Yeah, I also think you look at Johns as a backup 5 as a thing when Livers comes back. And I think that flexibility could be intriguing to be able to slide in basically either direction could be a nice
that's kind of the
asset for a lineup right now that is basically stuck in mud and you can't slide in any direction.
What was the game earlier this year when they finished with the Johns at the 5? Oregon? Yeah. So you've seen it. They can do it. It also depends on the matchup, right? If you have some of the centers in the league, just would never lend itself to trying that. But you'd just be putting Brandon in a possible situation. But a lot of these guys, you could certainly do it and find success. Yeah,
should be interesting, and obviously that depends a lot. Like, again, Isaiah Livers' health is the linchpin to all of this.
Like, what do you think about that lineup? Let's say Livers plays in this game, hypothetically. Ohio State, right? So Caleb Wesson, he's like a 6'9" guy. Yeah, he's stronger than Johns, thicker, but like he kind of plays away from the basket. He kind of floats around. He does some stuff. Like I would try it for a stretch and just see, what happens. You can kind of move Wesson around a lot defensively and kind of get his feet moving and things like that. worth a look. No,
you know me, I'd always play small. I would always say a team should play smaller than bigger. And here's the thing: Austin Davis is going to struggle to guard Caleb Weston, I would say, right? So it's more just what you're getting out of the matchup. And if he's struggling in space and you're struggling to contain ball screens, then yeah, I think it makes sense to play Johns at the 5. I don't know that. I feel like Juwan Howard's been more reactive, right? He tries to match his lineups to what the other team looks like more than how to exploit the other team. And I feel like that's a look that comes from the NBA, where you have NBA caliber players who do different things, so you use the ones that fit the other team. In college, you have your best players, and they look like what they look like. They play how they play. And so I think learning to trust your best players over what style of player they are is an adjustment to the college game. Ohio State also, I don't think they have much reserve big man depth. So if Wesson is out of that game, I think Ohio State usually opts to go smaller than bigger, right? The backup center is Kyle Young. So if you're putting that lineup out, then I think it makes a lot of sense to put Brandon at the 5 in that game.
For sure. I also like the idea of whether you're looking for a spark or you're struggling offensively in the half court, going small, putting Brandon at the 5, suddenly that's a team that can run. And you can maybe find some stuff in transition that you just don't really get with, John Teskey runs hard, but John Teskey's not, he's not a running 5. If you put that small ball lineup out there, you can go out, and I think they did. I think if you saw that maybe a little bit against Oregon, that feels like it was 10 years ago, but they can go out and play, and suddenly they're really athletic.
But here's the thing: all this depends on Isaiah Livers. If you don't have Isaiah Livers, Brandon Johns is playing. He played 38 minutes at the 4 last game. There's no more minutes you don't have minutes to put him somewhere else.
Totally.
So that is the X factor there. Those all sound great in theory, but they're all theory until Isaiah Livers is in a uniform.
Because as long as DeJulius is kind of struggling the way that he is, that the 3-guard lineup's pretty much a moot point right now. Remember that was a thing at some point. But all right, let's touch on Ohio State real quick before we slide over to Michigan State. Buckeyes obviously have had a very strange season, but are getting what?
Go ahead.
What'd you say?
I was going to say the Buckeyes had a week a lot like Michigan.
Yes. They at one point they were 12-7 overall, 2-6 in the league before picking up a pair of wins over Northwestern on the road and home against Indiana. DJ Carton obviously out with his kind of personal issues, and a team that has really been trying to find any kind of positivity, it seems like, for a while, maybe getting it. I think we both agreed that there was stuff. This just looked like a team that they didn't even look like they enjoyed playing together as recently as like a week or two ago. They just looked so awry, and but here they are. And you're right. These are two teams that are kind of trying to decide if their seasons are going to be worthwhile, right? Over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's similar to Michigan, where you look and you say, "Oh, they've only won 3 games since Christmas," but their losses are West Virginia on a neutral, Wisconsin at home. Okay, that happens. At Maryland, at Indiana, at Penn State, all probably NCAA tournament teams, all on the road, and they lost on a buzzer beater to Minnesota. That lines up almost identically with kind of what Michigan's done, right? Lost that buzzer beater to Illinois, lost a bunch of road games that you might not have really thought they would win, and then you're sitting and all of a sudden you're 2-6 and you're like, what the hell happened here? So I do think that they're better than their record. They're still 12th in KenPom. They demolished Penn State at home earlier this year. They beat Kentucky on a neutral. They blew out Villanova. Like, this team has a ceiling when it plays well.
There's talent.
There's talent.
Yeah.
They're the best shooting team in the Big Ten. So hard to figure out what really to make of Ohio State. They also played a really chippy game last year at the Chrysler Center that got real intense. Zavier Simpson and Caleb Weston got into it. It was a whole thing.
Right.
So a little bit of leftover from that should be interesting too, because that was heated. And it was a big win for Michigan at the time, even though Ohio State kind of petered off that year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's Ohio State in conference offense? Number 2, or are they still at 1?
Ohio State is second.
Yeah, and Michigan I think is 4th the last time I looked, but they're weird in that Michigan, despite the Rutgers game, Michigan doesn't really turn the ball over. Ohio State turns the ball over all over the place. Michigan sometimes can't shoot. Ohio State can shoot. They're very they're similar in so many ways and opposite in so many ways, which makes for a really interesting matchup here. I talked about Ohio State, ad nauseum in the preseason, how much I did like their pieces, but you've probably watched them more than me because I don't really have a take on this, but what has been especially wrong with their defense? They are ranked 13th in the conference in adjusted defense.
Well, the easy thing is that every Big Ten team can't shoot threes, yet Big Ten teams are shooting 38% from 3 against them, which is the worst 3-point defense in the league. And the math behind that would be that's probably a bit of random noise. That how well you defend threes doesn't, the accuracy of opponents' 3-point percentage is not that correlated to how you play defense as much as like how many threes they shoot, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just weird to see a team that has generally been pretty well coached defensively, who's second to last in effective field goal percentage defense and second to last in defensive free throw rate. So you foul all the time and give up a bunch of open shots. That's not a great combination. I don't know really why. I don't have a great reason why. I mean, it's not like they should be a good defensive team, you would think. They have a lot of switchable pieces on the perimeter. So I don't know. I don't think Wesson is necessarily the focal point of a great defense. He's not the most mobile of all bigs. He can stretch the floor, but he's not like the guy you want to have defending ball screens all the time, right? So that plays a part of it, I think. I don't have a great reason why they've struggled to defend the 3. I mean, basically, all their games shoot out. Like the only games that people make threes in are Ohio State games, and Ohio State's making them in the other team.
I mean, some of it's probably I don't know, I want to say like lack of want, but this has seemed like a mentally fragile team this year, and I think when that's your makeup, it shows the most on defense, right? When you're not making shots and suddenly it affects your defense, I think a lot of that has to do because like it seemed like a team where I don't know that they just haven't had much of a, when the shots are going in and everything's great and they look great, there's a team that can beat Kentucky. And when they're playing poorly and guys aren't communicating, they can probably self-destruct pretty quickly. So you got to kind of force that upon them. But I don't know. What do you like Michigan in this matchup?
I think so. I mean, the Teskey-Wesson matchup is huge. Whoever can stay out of foul trouble, whoever can really play better defensively. Michigan's drop coverage and ball screens will be tricky against Wesson because he likes to pick and pop so much. That will be something to keep an eye on. I think it really will come down to who plays the more physical inside brand of basketball, especially like starting on the defensive end. I think that the games where Michigan's at its best is when John Teskey can kind of set the tone in there. I thought he did a good job of that against Rutgers. And Wesson is really skilled, but he's actually not that good of a finisher. So a lot of times if you can defend the rim well on a couple of his early takes, he'll kind of just start floating on the perimeter and kind of shoot hopeful jumpers when you'd rather him shoot some of those shots at times. Although he is shooting, 41% from 3, which is pretty damn good for a big guy.
All right, we are going to switch over to Michigan State here, but for a second we have to take a pause because I have to take a phone call. All right, switching over to Michigan State here. Obviously, the big talk around the Spartans is, what is the deal with these slow starts on the road, and it's becoming a little inexplicable, and so much of it is I think probably tied directly to Cassius Winston, and he's kind of had some slow starts in games, and when he starts slow, the team starts slow, and the defense has come out, I think, a little flat in some of these games away from home, and they're just getting blitzed early. Like, it's almost like they're not realizing that they are everyone's biggest game, and these teams are coming out every night just ready to make a statement for their home fans and all that crap, and these are monster games for all these teams, and they're kind of coming out on their heels. They got lit up at Purdue. They came out flat at Indiana and almost got run out of there before coming back at the end of the first half. They should have been down like 13-4 at the first media timeout at Minnesota, but Minnesota couldn't make any shots, so Michigan State just kind of hung around through some poor play and then ended up running away from them. And then Wisconsin, it was the same old. Another slow start, trying to dig themselves a big hole. It's really hard to come back on the road because, like, even if you do climb all the way back to tie it, then having the energy to go and win a game in the last 8 minutes is really hard to do. It's kind of one of those things. They just haven't proven that they can kind of withstand those initial blitzes in games. It's, their road win, take Seton Hall out of it. That's November 14th. They won at Northwestern in a game that was a 5-point game. They didn't really play that well. I don't know. What do you make of the road woes of the Spartans?
So they also won at Minnesota, which I think is important to point out and remember, because I think you lose perspective of the narrative when a team is in it, right? When Michigan State's starting at home, playing 4 games in a row and 4-0, it's easy to think they're going to win every Big Ten game. Mm-hmm. But it's just really hard to win Big Ten road games. And then Michigan State loses a couple of Big Ten road games, which are reasonable games. These are basically 50-50 games, and they lost. Like, they missed a couple layups against Wisconsin and lost the game. It happens. I think we talked about it. If Michigan State could run the table at home and split its road games, it would win the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. Well, splitting your road games means you have to lose 5. They've lost 3. You lose road games. It's going to happen. I think the overreaction of everything in the moment is just magnified when the league is good. The scary part for Michigan State is they've lost 3 road games already, but they still have 4 road games against teams who should make the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. Still have to go to Michigan, still have to go to Illinois, still have to go to Maryland, still have to go to Penn State. So I think a little bit of that Minnesota road win feels really nice, but again, that's probably a road win against a team that doesn't look that likely to make the NCAA tournament. So there's tougher games still on the schedule, right? You could say 2 of Michigan State's road losses in the league are to teams that probably will miss the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. Or no, sorry, 1 win, Minnesota, and then a loss at Purdue. Wisconsin, I guess we'll see. So a lot to digest with that. But I also think, look, they win 2 of these last 4 big road wins. They're exactly where you said. They're 15-5, win the Big Ten. So I think you just overreact to the losses when they happen. Like, I saw Seth Davis didn't even have Michigan State ranked in the top 25, which is just ludicrous.
Jesus. I missed that one. Oh boy.
So people definitely overreact, right? And that's just what happens in January, February in college basketball. If Michigan State keeps winning every home game by 20 points, I don't think you really have to worry about Michigan State that much. This team is going to be where it wants to be. Some of those swing games will come down to the conference tournament race, or the conference title race, but that's not really what matters when you're really worried about making a run in the NCAA tournament. Like, does losing by 1 at Wisconsin really say anything about your chances to make a run in the NCAA tournament? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, part of it is, it'd be one thing if you're just losing road games, but when all 4 losses follow the same exact script, that's one thing where you're just like, okay, well, look, what is happening in that moment, right? And it's hard to start on the road. I get that.
Do you play NCAA tournament games on the road?
Yeah, but I mean, this is a conversation about you're trying to win the Big Ten. You have 2 legitimate teams right there at your heels that in some ways, I think at least one of them has an easier schedule the rest of the way. Michigan State has road games the rest of the way. Like, they need to figure out how to overcome this thing. I found that stat you were looking for, by the way. When we were talking beforehand, you wanted to know Michigan State's 2-point field goal possession in conference road games, right?
Yes, that was what I was looking for.
45.8%. That ranks 7th in the Big Ten.
Among just on the road, or just as it would rank overall?
In that stat category, in the Big Ten.
What are they shooting on twos in home games?
50%.
Yeah, so I think finishing has been a big issue. I think 2-point percentage, shooting percentage is generally a stat you can always look at, but
they're actually
it's really
shooting better threes on the road.
Yeah, it comes down to Michigan State's offense that I think is letting it down in big spots. The defense has been good. Turnovers at times, turnovers at Purdue, turnovers at Indiana, not at Wisconsin.
21.4% turnover percentage on the road this year in conference games.
Yeah, I mean, the Purdue turned it over enough against Purdue to be a bad turnover team on the road throughout the whole Big Ten season. So I believe that
And turnovers are exasperated on the road, right? Like I almost feel like a turnover at home's 1, right? A turnover on the road's like 1.5.
So here's my thing. Take all these road losses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's how Michigan State would lose a game in the NCAA tournament? Not finishing and turning it over all the time? Or do you think it would be something else?
What about getting blitzed early?
Yeah, is that how you think it goes down?
If it happens, I could certainly see that being the case, yeah.
I'm not saying they can't, I'm not, but most teams will lose a game in the NCAA tournament. I like to think about how a team would lose that game because a lot of times I don't necessarily think it's how you lose a lot of games in conference, especially on the road where you get called for a bunch of fouls or you miss a bunch of layups. I don't think Zavier Tillman's going to go 1 of 11 on 2-pointers in NCAA tournament game. I just don't. I mean, I think the Xavier thing that happens on the road.
The Xavier thing from the weekend, I think, is a total fluke. I have zero concerns about Zavier Tillman.
He shoots 66% at the rim on the year. 64 now. It went down 2% from that one game. But I feel like he had a game like this last year, too.
Everyone does.
Yeah, but there was one maybe he missed a bunch of free throws or something. But then he came back and made a bunch of free throws. I can't remember what game it was. But I feel like there was a kind of a Zavier Tillman moment there where he had a bad game and then all of a sudden it was back on track and he was great down the stretch. I just that's my thing. You lose a game because Tillman misses a bunch of shots. You're gonna win that game when it's played the next 10 times. So I don't know. And Wisconsin just plays Wisconsin basketball. It just doesn't apply to the rest of a team's season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that, and this is Izzo inside and out, and this is something that it won't change because it's been talked about in the past, and it just doesn't matter. This is just the way they do things. There is that interesting factor of he makes his subs early, regardless of the situation, and there are some times where they'll fall behind by 8 at 6 or 8 at the first media timeout, and then here comes 3 substitutions, and now Foster Lawyer's at point guard, and whoever is at other spots. But there's a change in the rotation. The other team already has momentum, and now you're putting in a lesser lineup, and that's how 8-point leads or 8-point deficits go to 16-point deficits. That's exactly what you saw at Indiana. You've seen it in other road games in the past, but that's just the way he does things. And I think a lot of that is he does plan for the NCAA tournament, and it's not about that game on that day where he's just going to throw stuff out the window that is kind of the tried and true measures of the program.
Also, Gabe Brown was sick
as hell,
3 minutes,
yeah.
and he's been really good in the Big Ten, and it's a really key part of, I think, what kind of makes that offense work at its best. I know Rocket had some good moments and has been playing well lately, but I think you get something, even if you're going to have both of those guys in the rotation, having Gabe Brown help, that's a key loss, I think, for Michigan State to operate at its best, especially on the road. So worth remembering that as well, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, and Michigan State in some of these tight finishes, I think because they have the experience that they have, it's not something that I would be overly concerned about. But Bart Torvik has him at 2-3 in close games. You'd like to see, because you know that there are going to be close games coming down the stretch here if you actually want to win this conference. Do probably need to maybe tighten things up or clean things up a little bit down the stretch and to make winning plays. And the crazy thing with the Tillman spot, the only thing that really was something I would point a finger at or poke at would be going to him on that one play call where he clearly was struggling and put him in a post-up spot that turned into a over-the-shoulder hook. It wasn't a layup. It was kind of a little baby hook, and there was no way that shot was going in, considering what was happening with him that day. And of all other options, like, maybe just keep the ball in Cassius Winston's hands in that possession, if at all.
It was a great look.
It was a good look, I know, but it was just like right when the ball touched his hands, I was like, oh no, you just knew how that was ending. Yeah.
More serious concern.
Yeah.
Aaron Henry.
Yes.
This situation is getting worse, not better. His Big Ten stats are scary bad. No, they're not Aaron Wheeler bad, but they're like getting closer to that point, right? Like, he's shooting 36% on twos.
Yeah.
He's Aaron freaking Henry. He should be able to so he shot 58% on twos in Big Ten games last year. He should be a guy who's a 55 plus 2-point shooter. He's shooting 31% on threes, turning it over a bunch. His offensive rating is 83.5 in Big Ten games. Basically like 100 is what you'd say is average. So he's not even really on the radar. Those are scary numbers, and it could make for a great story if he figures it out and gets hot down the stretch. But I think as far as what Michigan State is big picture, I think that's a scary sight. And I don't know how do you fix that at this point?
You can clearly see when a guy is aiming on every shot and not shooting the ball. It's the same thing with pitchers, right? Mm-hmm. And you can see every time he gets to the top of the release on his shots, he is aiming the ball. And like the Northwestern game was hard to watch him go through that because he was doing the move that you want to see him take every possession, right? Little two dribbles, beat a guy, get some space, pull up jumper. That is bread and butter. That is, in theory, what gets him to the NBA and stuff like that. Offensively. So, and he went 1 for 7 on twos in that game. And there were all these nice, clean pull-up looks that it's exactly what you want from him. And when he missed his last one, it was like a 12-footer, and he yelled fuck louder than I think I've ever heard anyone yell in a basketball game. And I think it's a lot, we talked about Brandon Johns in between the ears. I think a lot of it with Aaron is between the ears. I think he is putting enormous amounts of pressure on himself. I don't think he feels comfortable or confident in his shot at all. And that also, that translates when you're not confident in your shot. Now you're not confident when you touch the ball. When you're not confident when you touch the ball, you're constantly in between moves. Do I dribble? Do I pass it? Do I go? And then that's turnovers, right? He had 3 turnovers in the loss at Wisconsin. The interesting thing is the rebounding is not like, you'd almost wish a game where you'd be like, Aaron, don't even worry about shooting the ball. Go get 10 rebounds, right? And just play lockdown defense. And the rebounds aren't even coming. So, I think he's done a much better job and shown strides in creating and finding other guys. But, just when he can couple that with everything else, you're right. It's starting to be on the clock because it's February 3rd. And it's like, okay, when, if not now, when, right?
Yeah, so
in terms of this year, I'm not talking projecting his future or anything. I'm just talking about right here and now.
In Big Ten games, there are 91 qualified players on KenPom across all teams. He is ranked 84th of those 91 in offensive efficiency. And the only player who's used 20% of offensive possessions but is less efficient is Pete Nance. So he's bottoming out right now. He did bottom out with his jump shot last year. Didn't he go through a stretch where he made like 1 of 25 or something, and then he started making them later in the season. So he's shot his way through this in the past, but it feels like, I mean, if you think about 2 months ago, we were talking about what's the best way to get him out of this. And I think you advocated for a little more positivity. Doesn't seem like the...
is he getting positivity?
No, he's not. I'm saying that it's getting worse.
Right.
I that's what I was trying to get at here. He clearly has talent, but the next month is just huge for him to create some positive momentum, and because he can change this team at his best.
Yes.
Right now he's changing his team at his worst, I think. So you need to figure out how to get something out of him. I don't know. It's been a really weird season for him because there was a moment there where we were really talking about him as a playmaker. He did some really good things, but just 2 of 10 on twos this week. It's not great.
Yeah. And the thing is they need him for his defense. You know, there's a reason Michigan State is top 5 in the country in defensive efficiency. And it's Aaron Henry and Zavier Tillman as the cornerstones of that. Agree?
100%.
So you can't sit him and just let him figure things out by watching the game or any of that shit. Like, the guy's got to play. He played 36 minutes against Wisconsin while being a complete non-factor offensively. But you don't...
You just go to him less?
Maybe. You know, I mean, Rocket Watts is showing strides where maybe he can kind of take on a little bit of that supposed scoring role that you would have expected. Same with Gabe Brown, right? Malik Hall's showing things in fits and bursts. But, yeah, I mean, maybe you just say, you know, you don't worry about things. But at the same time, like, you don't want to tell a basketball player that. Like, that's not... What does that do, you know?
I think of Charles Matthews, first year at Michigan. He basically took a back seat on offense in the Big Ten tournament and kind of rebuilt his game from the ground up a little bit. He was not really a go-to guy. He was like using in the teens possession-wise for that whole tournament, and he played really well defensively. But he was more of a secondary option, and then he really figured out his offense in the NCAA tournament that year and gained some confidence. At some point, I could see just like a stretch where maybe just like, all right, we're going to feature Rocket more this game, and then Henry
kind of been
defense.
there. That's the thing.
So maybe on the other side of this, that'll come out. You know, I could see something like that translate. Like, just give him a smaller, basically, workload. Like, this is what your goal is for the game. Just play great defense, like you said, and then maybe the offense just comes more naturally. Whereas if you're going to say we're going to try to use you as basically the second or third offensive option at times, maybe that's not as great. So that's something to at least keep an eye on, where could help him build up some confidence, right? I don't know. It's just a tricky spot.
Yeah, and there's also he gets like he just doesn't get like a lot of easy baskets of where, you know, those types of, you know, get out and transition and get some dunks and blah blah blah, go finish at the rim. Like, maybe that's part of it too. Is that
like how he's being used?
He doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, how often does he get anything going to the basket? And part of it is his game is that pull up jumper too. Like, maybe part of the thing is this guy has taken 3 foul shots in the last 8 games. How is that possible? Right? Maybe that's it. Get the ball, run into someone. Go to the basket. You know, he's a great athlete. There's no, and he's a 75% free throw shooter. Like, you know, there's, and the thing is with Aaron, and it's always been this way, is I mean, you could sit here and break him down every which way, but and it's just because the talent is what it is, and just everyone, you know, and he is a really high character dude. You kind of just want to see good things happen for this guy. So that's a pretty jarring stat, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's never been a guy who gets to the free throw line a lot, but it is, I don't know.
Free throws in 8 games as you know, with his level of usage and stuff is
not ideal.
Not ideal.
So you are the resident Penn State podcast expert. How do these two teams match up from a Philly perspective?
From a Philly perspective, well, I do have to say one of the big blind spots in Tom Izzo's recruiting is his lack of Philadelphia players. Wow. But he's recognizing his shortcomings. He brought in AJ Hoggard, his Philly kid.
Can't wait to read the feature on him.
Oh, get ready. Penn State's really, I think there was a time when they had that 3-game losing streak, and we were talking on this podcast of, is Penn State going to be the one of the two Big Ten teams here that disappears like a ship in the night, or what? Is this going to all fall apart? They started 2-4 in the conference after starting the season 12-2 overall, and they lost at Rutgers, home against Wisconsin, and then at Minnesota, but have responded in a pretty big way, beating Ohio State at home, winning at Michigan, beating Indiana at home, and then winning at Nebraska. What continues to be startling about Penn State is it's an offensively driven team, and that's just a pretty strange thing to see when you're so used to what Penn State has been. But Michigan State's also the best defensive team in the conference. So, the matchup here to watch is, it's still Lamar Stevens for Penn State. You let him get going, and that's when they're going to be at their best. And you remember it from the if any Michigan State fans watched Penn State's win at Michigan, the key to that game, I thought, was that Lamar Stevens got going early, got really positive momentum, and it built. Penn State had all the confidence in the world, and they went out and they won that game. So I think you have to kind of answer that call first and foremost. And, the guy we were just talking about, Aaron Henry, I would imagine draws that matchup. So this is kind of the perfect game to be like, don't worry about the scoring. Don't worry about any of that shit. Go shut down this guy who has scored, 2,500 career points or something ridiculous like that. Because that's how Michigan State wins this game, especially at home.
Yeah, I think you overrate how good on offense Penn State is a bit.
In comparison to what the program has been?
Sure. So
I'm not measuring it against quality basketball. I'm measuring it against Penn State's recent history, where couldn't score.
I think at their core, Penn State is still a defense-first team. I know that the defense numbers are really, really bad because they just got run out of the gym at Ohio State in December. Like, they gave up like 100 points on 60%. Like, it was like the worst defensive game of the year. Now they're like a 500. They're like an average efficiency margin team because they ran Ohio State out of the gym in State College. I think that the two things that you just have to deal with when you play Penn State are their transition offense. And so you have to play great transition defense because they run at every opportunity and they try to get downhill and they try to run into quick shots. And then you have to not turn the ball over because they pressure the ball really well. And they have Jamari Wheeler is one of the best steal guys in the Big Ten. Right. He has been, and he can really heat up the ball. Isaiah Brockington can do the same thing. And they will trap and try to make life difficult on Cassius Winston. And those dudes, like, they're athletic as all hell. Like, they are quick. Like, they made life hell on Zavier Simpson, and they'll do that, right? So that's what you have to deal with, I think. And if you can maintain that, I don't really fear them as like a shooting team, right? Marion Jones is a 35% Big Ten play. He can shoot it, but the other guys, I like Miles Dredd is in a huge slump. He's hit a couple lately, but you're let him beat you, right? So I don't know. Like Lamar Stevens, something else has to happen for Penn State to be able to beat you. Like Lamar Stevens isn't just going to go drop 40 and they're going to win. I think it's more going to be, we turned the ball over too much. Penn State ran into easy baskets and then they won. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when I say they're more offensively driven, I think it's more that like them being offensively not being offensively inept makes them more prone to like being reliant on its offense in terms of how to win games. And like when they're scoring points, they look really good, and that's when they start playing. Penn State in the past, I thought, was still okay with the idea of winning ugly, winning with defense, try to make you look as shitty as possible, and then steal wins here and there. Like, this now just seems like more of a basketball team that wants to get out and actually score the ball, play that type of basketball, and not, if they're not making baskets, then they ain't winning games. So,
yeah, see, I think that's you're missing part of the picture. I think the biggest difference between this team and the last two Penn State teams is they play fast as hell. So they were 217th, 172nd.
What does that tell you, though? They're looking to get out and score. They're looking to get out and play. They realize
that they can't score efficiently, so they like to run. Yes, but that doesn't mean they're good on offense, right? So they're 48th in offensive efficiency this year. They were 77th last year, 42nd the year before. So they're still pretty average offense, but they're a top 40 pace team, which is rare to see in the Big Ten. So those games are getting higher scoring, but it's also because their offense is so reliant on their defense to force turnovers and create easy opportunities. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're a top 25 in block and steal rate. So they are disruptive as all hell on defense, and then they try to just get out and run and make things happen.
Yeah, Mike Watkins remains one of the more interesting players in the league, just in terms of, you talk about him being a disruptor. It's like which guy shows up on any given night. If he shows up and decides to want to be one of the best players on the floor, he can be exactly that. And then there's other games where it's just kind of out to lunch and you're not exactly sure what's even going on. And that's when Penn State can look especially bad. So in that home loss to Wisconsin, when they scored only 49 points, he played 16 minutes, wasn't foul trouble. He had only 2 fouls. He had committed 3 turnovers, went 0 for 3, and that was it. And this team's not winning basketball without, or not going to be able to play winning basketball without. In terms of coming into Breslin and winning a game, they're not doing it if they're not getting an appearance from Mike Watkins. I'm just talking about this game. So what do you think about this matchup in terms of the, kind of Cassius Winston finding a way to kind of cut up this defense?
This whole game comes down to how comfortable Cassius Winston is against Wheeler and Brockington.
Correct.
On ball pressure.
Right.
Mike Watkins is insignificant. He's been benched for the last 4 games. He is a good rim protector. He'll block a few shots. He'll commit a few fouls. I don't think he's key to, they don't need him to go and get 15 and 10 to win this game. I don't think
they can win without him, with him having some of the no-shows that he's had this year, but we'll agree to disagree.
What do you think about how Michigan State matches up with this team where Lamar Stevens basically plays the 4? Mm-hmm. Does Michigan State put Malik Hall on him? Or how does that?
I don't think I'd mess around with starting with a freshman on Lamar.
So do you go
Lamar
small?
Stevens.
What do you do?
Well, you
put Malik Hall on Miles Dredd.
Who's starting at the 3? Is it Dredd?
A guard usually.
I
guess Lundy's starting right now, but he's playing
18
minutes. So they'll play Lundy at times, and then they'll play mostly with 3 guards, Stevens, and a big.
Lundy in the last 5 games, 26 minutes, 27 minutes, 16 minutes, 15 minutes, 18 minutes.
So half the game they're playing 3 guards. Half the game they're playing a shooting wing.
So you can put whoever's at the 4 on a...
who's Marcus Bingham guarding in this game? Or does it,
how many minutes is Marcus Bingham playing in this game?
Well, maybe that's the answer.
Right.
So that...
I don't know. I just don't mess around. If you let Lamar Stevens get going, that's how this can be a game, I think. I wouldn't even mess around with it. I just let Aaron Henry, and if you have to have a mismatch on Miles Dredd, whatever, so be it. But you just... I don't know. If all those other guys want to come out and start banging threes, okay, then you can start adjusting as needed be. But I think first things first is you have to just, if you annoy Lamar Stevens, you can annoy Penn State.
Yeah, to me, this is a game where I think the key is Michigan State just getting its transition offense going early, and I could see Penn State just getting run out of the gym. Like Penn State's success relies on just making the other team play one of their worst games. So something has to happen. If Cassius Winston and Zavier Tillman play their game, Michigan State wins this game comfortably. If they get frustrated or just like struggle against some of that pressure, then maybe something else happens. And then on offense, it's just the same thing. Penn State is just going to ISO, and they're going to try to score. Last in the league in assisted field goal rate. It's just beat your guy or chuck up a three. There's not much more to it. That's Pat Chambers' offense, and it has been for a while. So I just have a hard time seeing Penn State win this game, but they are on a hot streak. They've won 4 in a row. That game at Michigan is probably one of their most impressive wins of the season, I would say. But
I think this is also the annual game where Patrick Chambers explains that Penn State will never get a call at a place like Breslin. I think this is one of his annual spots for that for that speech.
I'm a lot more curious about this game when these two teams play in March. The game at State College will tell me a lot more about either team because I don't know. Penn State feels like a team that got the road when they needed at Michigan, is in a good spot. I just don't see it coming now on winning 4 games in a row, feeling like you're actually good. It just sets up to lose by 20 at Breslin.
Yeah, and, is Michigan State going to lose a second straight game and have it come at home?
Not to Penn State at home.
Right. All right. Anything else?
KenPom spread is 7. I would take that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of Penn State's last. Let's see.
They got blown out last year, I believe. 71-56.
Wait. I got the media guide right here. Hold on.
What are we looking for? Their last win there?
Yeah. Let's see.
Like Taylor Battle?
All-time record versus opponents. This is the content that the people want.
This is what they need.
This is what you want, folks. I know it. All right. Penn State, they won on a neutral floor in 2017.
Oh. No, Michigan State won that game.
No, Michigan State lost to Penn State on a neutral court.
At the Palestra.
Oh, there you go. I was at that game. Home loss, 2009. Michigan State is 24-1 all time against Penn State at the Breslin.
Taylor Battle won that game. That was the NIT champion Penn State team.
Whoa, big time. I was in Philadelphia.
Fair enough.
Although I think I might have been at that game for Basketball Times, traveling with Ed DeChellis and the Nittany Lions. I think that's right.
The year after Penn State won the NIT?
Yeah.
11-20. Impressive NIT bounce there.
But then to the NCAA tournament in a year or two later, and Ed DeChellis made the obvious coaching jump, deciding to leave and go to Navy. One of the all-time exits. All right. That'll do it for this week before we get too deep into Penn State basketball history. We appreciate everyone listening. Make sure you are subscribed to Hoops. Make sure you are subscribed to The Athletic. Lots of stuff coming this week. And
we will have a second pod.
We will.
The second half of this week, so stay tuned for that too.
Indeed. Michigan State in Ann Arbor on Saturday. We will be all over it with a preview pod, and I assume we can record that day right after. It's a noon tip-off, isn't it?
Yeah, post-game pod. We haven't done a post-game pod.
Outstanding. Maybe we bring the microphones to the bar. What do you think?
Real test for our audio production.
I think that's the move. We got the mics. We are ready to go. We look forward to it. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Be sure to tip those bartenders and servers.